Hey guys, it's been a while, but wanted to tap in. I know it's been quite a long time, a lot of years since I've made a video here. However, I know that Christmas is coming up and a lot of people are interested in building a computer. If you didn't know, computer building is another one of my hobbies that I've gotten quite good at, as I've been doing it for about 15 years at this point, which is kind of an old head admission. But what I want to talk about is how to build the very best budget gaming computer this holiday season, how to go about doing that. And I'm going to go for a little bit of a, a teach a man to fish approach here. I've seen some really great videos that have been put out on how to build the best budget system. Toasty Bros just put out a great one that I'll link to down in the description, which was ironically just like the build that I had done for my wife. And we just got her computer up and running and she's really enjoying it. But I thought that there was some room to improve, and I also kind of want to teach you guys to fish rather than give you a fish. So that way you can choose how to build the computer that's best for you and understand the decisions that you're making. So what we're going to be looking at today is we're going to be targeting the budget and ultra budget price points, looking at somewhere between the $400 to $600 range, possibly even lower, depending on what kind of cuts you're willing to make. Although with all things, bear in mind there are diminishing returns in both directions. We are nowhere near, with this price point, the point at which you would be seeing diminishing returns on the high end. But if you do start to shave off dollars past a certain point, the amount of money that you save winds up being disproportionately less compared to the performance that you're going to be getting here. And So I've put together a build here as sort of a core that we're going to work from. We're going to go through all these parts one by one, and I'm going to explain the methodology between in terms of how I chose them and how you might choose the ones that are best for you. We're going to go in order, starting with the CPU. So without further ado, if you've never used PC Part Picker before, this is an excellent website that helps to aggregate all the different prices, sorting by specs, reviews, and pricing, from all the different websites that sell various computer components. When you go to PC Part Picker, you go to the builder we were just looking at, and as you start adding parts, an automatic compatibility filter will disallow you from adding parts that are incompatible with the ones you've already selected. Now, it's always good to double check this. However, I have found that over the years this has gotten really, really good, to the point at which I rarely find a situation in which the compatibility filter is missing something, and oftentimes it is overly cautious, and sometimes things will be compatible that it might warn you about, which we'll look at in a moment. So first of all, we're going to look at the brains of the computer, which is the CPU. The CPU is important in a variety of ways, particularly depending on what you're trying to target, whether you're trying to go for high refresh rate gaming or not, and how you would like to see this system built out in the future if you want to, not future-proof, but I would say give yourself room for upgrades without having to replace parts or build an entirely new system. So the first CPU that I'm going to recommend, and the way that I generated this list is I sorted by price over here on the side. I've gone ahead down here, and I'm just sorting by AM4. At this point, for ultra budget, I'm not really recommending Intel CPUs. There are some good ones out there if you really, for whatever reason, want to go with Intel CPUs. But for certain upgrade path reasons, I'm going to be recommending building on AM4, actually skipping off on the AM5, which is the newest platform from AMD, because I think for budget building, objectively, definitely compared to AM5 and also compared to what's being offered on Intel, either on the DDR4 or DDR5 side, we're just seeing a lot better value, as well as the ability to upgrade in the future in a way that's also value oriented. So we're going to be selecting AM4 here. Now, building on AM5 is not necessarily a bad idea if you want to, I don't know, be able to keep the same motherboard for years and years and drop in a CPU later. AM4 is at the end of its life, so they're not going to be releasing any new CPUs for it, although at this price point there'll be a nice used option to upgrade to in the future, which will be really great for performance that we'll look at. We're going to keep it simple though, and I'm going to recommend AM4. If you want to know more about AM5 or you want to look to doing something like that or doing an Intel build, you can go ahead and put that in the comments and I'd be happy to help. So first of all, the main CPU I'm going to recommend is the Ryzen 5 5600G. Now in the computer next to me, I've got a Ryzen 5 5600, which is also an excellent CPU. It's going to get you some better performance that we'll look at in just a moment. The difference between the two of them, other than the increased CPU performance on the 5600 as opposed to the G, is that the G has built-in integrated graphics, which is a really nice thing to have if your video card dies and you need to RMA it, or let's say you want to maybe do an entirely new build, like let's say a few years down the line you drop in a really great GPU into this. Just as a stopgap measure, you keep using your old system, but at a certain point you want to upgrade that to be able to go forward and drop a new CPU in to remove that CPU bottleneck. With integrated graphics, you could sell the whole system complete to someone or use it as a secondary system without a video card, and so it's a compelling option. The main reason I'm recommending it is I'm not generally recommending using integrated graphics for a variety of reasons. Main reason I'm recommending is if we look at the 5500, which is basically the same CPU but without the integrated graphics, and it's a little bit slower, it's only like $8 less. So you're losing some performance, you're losing the integrated graphics. There's, in my opinion, no real reason to pick this up right now. 5600 is going to cost you about 30% more. It's not going to give you that much in performance in most cases, and we'll talk about that in a moment. If you have the $30 to spare, I think it's definitely worth it, particularly if you don't want to mess around with upgrading the CPU in the future. I have done 3 builds for friends recently with 5600s. It is just a terrific CPU. Gets you most of the performance of a high-end system at a hilariously lower price. So, gonna really highly recommend the AMD Ryzen 5600 6-core. If you want to save a little more money, which this is a budget build, the 5600G is definitely worth it. If you need to shave off a few more dollars, 5500 is not a bad pick. If you need to save even more money, you can get the Ryzen 5 4500, although you're going to see a much more significant hit to performance with this that we're going to look at in a moment. This is actually a 3000 series GPU, sort of rebranded as a 4000 series. And that being said, when you're at a budget like this, sometimes every dollar counts, and I don't know your situation, so you can save yourself maybe something in the ballpark of $20 or so on a 4500, although I'd definitely recommend avoiding that if you can. You're also going to get a nice game bundle with this, so as you can see, the 5600 comes with the 5500 comes with this Uncharted game bundle. Should be available for most retailers. I think some of these are not showing it for whatever reason. Oh, this one's got it. So you can get the Uncharted games if you want. That's a pretty nice little combo there as well. If we look at performance here, first of all, I'm going to show you the difference between the 5500 and the 4500. As you can see, there is a pretty significant difference in performance, and this is only going to grow in less GPU-bound situations. So if you can spend the extra $20 to go to the 5500 or the 5600G, definitely something I would recommend. That being said, you are getting a majority of the performance here, and if you're targeting 1080p 60 and you're going to be in a GPU limited situation anyway, then it's not going to make too big of a difference. And their test system that they're using here, we can see, I don't know if they link it, but I'm sure that they're using a higher end GPU, and that's really not the use case we're going to be looking at. Now, if we wanted to take a look at the 5500 versus the 5600G, you can see you're getting a little bit more performance there too, just because it's binned a little bit higher and clocked higher. So that extra $8, especially the integrated graphics, is, in my opinion, a no-brainer. Don't think anyone should be buying the 5500 at that price. That being said, these prices could fluctuate since you watch this video, as sometimes that can change rapidly, particularly during the holiday season. And you might want to look at getting a 5500 if there was, say, like a $20 difference in price or something like that. Finally, looking at the difference between the 5600G and the 5600, I'm going to show you a couple different scenarios here. In some situations, you can see the difference between the two of them is not going to be huge. And that's because we have some GPU limitations going on here, which we're definitely going to be bumping into in this build. So your differences in performance are probably going to be even less. So I don't think there's anything wrong with saving the extra money to go with the 5600G. In fact, that's my main recommendation. If you're building a budget system right now, I think the 5600G is absolutely the best pick you can buy at these prices. Second to that would be the 5500. And then the 5600, if you're looking to get a little bit more performance, or you had a planned increase in graphics card, maybe you've got a birthday coming up in a few months and you're forward thinking to that. going for the 5600 is not a bad price, particularly if you're looking at esports games where you're trying to get a higher frame rate at these really high frame rates. So let's say, you know, you're into esports and you want to invest in a really high refresh rate monitor, which we're going to talk about monitors in a minute. As you can see, when we start getting into the really high frame rates here, we do start to see a difference, particularly if we're not GPU limited, because at this point we're hitting the CPU limit, and that small difference increased to 50% difference. Now, this is versus the 5600X, which is a little bit faster than the 5600G, but definitely not worth it at this price. So if you just want to pick something, I would say if you're building a casual system, which is really what we're looking at, the 5600G is your choice. And if you're really trying to scrape and save every dollar you possibly can, then you can go for the 4500, but I don't super recommend it. If you want to give yourself a little bit more breathing room, particularly on the high end, the Ryzen 5 5600 is also an excellent choice. So moving on from there, I do want to mention the 5800X3D. Now you might be asking, why am I talking about a CPU that is almost the whole price of possibly your system, depending on how you're building this? The reason why is because depending on the motherboard that you pick, as well as the CPU, you'll be able to drop this CPU into this system later down the road. This is excellent because this CPU, as we can see, paired with the RTX 4090 here versus the i9-13900K, which is a hilariously more expensive CPU and platform, is really not seeing huge differences in performance. Now, of course, this is going to be depending on the game, and in higher frame rate situations, then just like we saw, we're going to see a greater difference between these two. But this CPU is going to be delivering great performance for a long time, many years, and that is why I'm recommending AM4, because it's cheap and you can drop this guy in later. So that's something to consider when we're putting this together, that you really just need to get a CPU that's good enough for what you're doing now, and be aware that you do retain the option to upgrade this in the future. Now, you will need some better cooling options in terms of a CPU cooler. You're also going to need obviously a bigger power supply if we're pushing up on that limit. And this is something to bear in mind. Not all motherboards are going to support this either, but the ones I'm going to recommend to you, we're going to talk about that in a moment. So moving on from there, we're actually going to go ahead and talk about motherboards real quick. There's a lot of different options for the AM4 platform. What we need to be looking at right now today is the B550, as well as, if we go down here and select A520, this is going to be the two chipsets that we're most interested in. Now, A520 is a really budget-oriented chipset. If you're trying to save as much money as possible, it does start adding up. If you go down to the Ryzen 4500 and you go down to this motherboard, well, now we're talking about a savings of over $50, which is a substantial portion of the build, especially if you don't have a lot to play around with. And you'll be getting the vast majority of the performance, particularly if you're targeting like a 1080p 60 type situation. That being said, I do recommend going for a B550 board. I'm going to actually recommend this Gigabyte B550 DS3H AC. It's an epic board. You're going to have no problem dropping in a Ryzen 7 5800X3D in a couple years, used if you wanted to, because those are going to come way down in price in the future. You get 4 RAM slots, so you can upgrade to 32 gigs if you needed to, although I doubt it. You get a nice M.2 slot, which is really great for your SSD storage, so you don't have to run a SATA cable, and you're going to get faster speeds. You also get PCI Express 4.0, which is important because of some of the video cards we're going to look at later down the line. You get, as I said, onboard Wi-Fi. It's just going to be a much better board all around than those bottom tier ones that we were looking at before. That being said, sometimes you can get some phenomenal deals. Like I saw a deal on Woot for one of those A520 boards that I just picked up for $48 for an old 2600X CPU I've got laying around, and that's a great deal. But if we're talking about, maybe $30 difference, $20 difference, the B550 is going to serve you a lot better. You're going to get a much higher quality product that's going to be more future-proof. You can upgrade much more easily. And in some cases, significantly more performance if we're buying a video card that's going to benefit from that PCI Express speed difference, which if you've not been paying attention so far and you are, or maybe you're just like really not into all the nitty gritty of this, my main recommendations are, as I said again, the 5600G, 5500, or that 5600 For your motherboard, I highly recommend the B550M here. There are some other boards you could look at. This price may change, but getting a good quality B550 board with good reviews on it, and you can look up documentation on it online, is going to be worthwhile. If you were going to be dropping down to something like this, then going for that cheaper motherboard like we talked about before, I bring that up and we skip ahead, like this A520M starts to make more sense because we're really trying to save as much money as possible. That being said, right now we are building this around the micro ATX platform. If you want to build full ATX, there's no problem with that, although I really doubt that you'll need these extra slots. This is an example of another great board. This one actually does not have this one does not have the onboard Wi-Fi like we were looking at that other one, so I think that's a better board for most people. They do sell boards like these with onboard Wi-Fi. You can look and shop around for yourself. At this point, I'm recommending this board. Now, if you wanted to build a mini ITX system, it's tough right now. The cheapest board you can possibly get right now today is $178. That's a lot of money for a budget build and really hard to endorse. You could back order this one. I just built a mini ITX rig for a friend of mine. Really useful if you travel around with your computer, you take it to a friend's house for LAN gaming, you're tight on space. I've even taken mine. I've got one for my wife, and we take it sometimes on the carry-on bag on the airplane. It's small enough that you can do that, so that's pretty cool. But at this price, I just can't recommend it. This is the cheapest option you could possibly go for. That may be a reason to look at other platforms, but from what I've seen, ITX boards are just really expensive right now. So I'm gonna have to shy away from recommending an ITX build for that reason. So those are your options on motherboard. As I said, I really can't recommend highly enough this Gigabyte board available right now. Get yourself a decent B550 board. If you want to get an ATX board, you might need to spend a little bit more, but there's a lot of great options on them, quite inexpensively as well. ITX, as I mentioned, is going to be more pricey. And then if you really need to save as much money as possible, an A520 board will give you the compatibility for those new CPUs, but you're going to be limited in terms of what you're going to be able to upgrade to. I definitely would not put the 5800X3D on this. You might set it on fire. Moving on, choosing memory is going to be really, really easy. We are just going to go for cheap 2 8GB sticks of DDR4 at 3200 speed. Searching for it these prices are going to change all the time, so you just really need to come over to PC Part Picker here. Go ahead and select either if you're building out a build, it'll just use the compatibility filter here. But we're going to be selecting DDR4, minimum 3200 speed, 2x8 gigs. Don't buy 1x8 gig. You're going to decrease your bandwidth, and this will actually hurt your performance. Really no need to upgrade to 32 gigs. In fact, you can get away with 8 gigs in most cases, although you're not going to save much money by going for 2x4 gig sticks. So doing 2x8 gig, make sure you're, if possible, buying something with less than 16 CAS latency. Those are really the two numbers we're looking for. If you see something like this, any of these three, 3200 speed, 2x8 gigs, CAS latency 16, go ahead and buy it, 40 bucks. That's going to be an easy choice. Here's an example of one. Nothing wrong with that. Then we're going to be looking at your storage. Now, depending on the type of motherboard you purchased, if you bought a motherboard that has an M.2 slot, which those B550s are going to have that, then I recommend putting one in. It's going to be faster. It means you're not going to have to run another cable. If you're using a modular power supply, you could possibly forgo the SATA cable and save yourself some room, not having to cable route that or tuck that away into the case. Really highly recommended. So when you're searching for one, you're just going to want to come over here, select SSD. I don't recommend going less than 500 gigs. I mean, COD is like 200 gigs at this point, just to update it all the way. So 500 gigabytes, a little bit anemic in my opinion. Going up to 1 terabyte is not a bad idea. I have a 2 terabyte in my system, and I think it's just sufficient. Then we're going to want to go ahead and make sure we select NVMe here. And then, we're going to want to look at getting an M.2 drive. Now, not all M.2 drives are the same. You can see that this one here has 3 prongs on it, while this one has 2. You're going to want to get one of these ones with 2 prongs, because that is going to be, I think this is actually miscategorized. This shouldn't be here. This is an older SATA M.2 drive. Most of the ones you're gonna get, I don't know why this is showing up. They must have listed it wrong. If you're getting an NVMe SATA drive, take a look at the picture. If it has 2 prongs, good reviews. It's not going to be the fastest drive in the world since we're filtering for the cheapest one, but you know, I pulled up a Team Group 512 gigabyte basic M.2 drive here. For gaming, it'll be just fine. You don't need the fastest speeds in the world, and it'll probably be way faster than anything you've ever used. So just get whatever's cheap, get what's on sale. Now, furthermore, we're going to go ahead and take a look at a case. Now, obviously, depending on what video card you get, or if you wanted to, you know, put one of those massive new video cards in the future, if you wanted to, like, let's say you wanted to drop a 5800X3D in this down the road, you wanted to make sure that you built something that you could drop a huge video card into it and not have to worry about cooling or space constraints, then, you know, bear that in mind when you're choosing your case. You may want to choose a bigger one. What I'm recommending today is the Thermaltake Versa H18 or the H17. These are one of several really good options in the micro ATX case side of things. They're both about $50. This one I think is a little bit less than $50 with this discount. I just built one a system for a guy in this case. He really loved it. I thought it was easy to build in. It's got mesh magnetic filters on the top, lots of USB ports, cable routing was a breeze. Had really no complaints despite it. You know, it's a cheaper case, so the metal's a little bit thin. But, you know, all things considered, it comes with a fan. Not too bad. I built a case, built using this case years ago for my brother. This one's on sale here for $35. It's an older case, but it's made by Fractal. Very basic, but quite decent. If you find a deal on something like this and you wanted to save some money, there's really nothing wrong with that. So this is a good case. Of course, you could go forward and buy a full-size ATX case. If you were going to do that, you'd want to make sure that you went down here, and instead of selecting micro ATX mini tower, we'd want to select ATX mid tower, and this is going to show us some bigger cases. As you can see, they don't necessarily cost any more. We've got some good options here. Just looking, they've got the Thermaltake H22. That's another option. So we've got a lot of options here in terms of what you want to build in. You know, you pick something that works for you, pick something with good reviews, do a little research into it, and you should be all right. I will say, if you find a case that's got an included power supply on the cheap end, don't use it. Do not use these cheap cases, power supplies, because they might set your house on fire. So these are my recommendations. You can choose from there. Now, when we come to the video card, this is the real meat and potatoes, and I think this is where my video is going to differ from some of the other videos I have that I've seen. Hopefully, this will be the best video. You know, if you see somebody else, you know, feel free to do your research, learn about these computer parts. I've done a variety of different budget builds for people on the ultra budget side, as well as sort of just the regular budget end. And I know this is where the fanboy wars tend to get the strongest. AMD and Intel is one thing, but AMD versus Nvidia is where people have real strong feelings. Honestly, you need to just buy the card that's going to get you the best performance and have the features that you're looking for at the best price. Right now, in the budget realm, that is basically AMD all the way. I cannot recommend an Nvidia card. I will talk about some Nvidia cards if you want to get one, but you're going to be spending a pretty penny and you're going to be getting a lot less performance. Main benefits of Nvidia cards, DLSS, which is their upscaling methods, a little bit better than FSR, although FSR has really improved over the years. I think they're quite comparable at this point. Of course, you've got ray tracing, but at these levels of performance, you're going to be having serious difficulty ray tracing. Most games anyway, you're going to be turning down settings, not adding on ray tracing. So with that said, there's a few different options. If you're going for, you're targeting solid performance, you want to be able to play games at 1080p, crank up the settings and not worry about it in 99% of cases. If you want to get some high refresh rate gaming, like maybe you get a cheap 144 hertz monitor, or maybe you even want to do a little bit of 1440p or 4K, depending on the game. The RX 6600 is just an incredible value right now. I bought this exact card for my friend's build that I did for him with the R5 5600 and that same mini ITX motherboard I showed you. It's been running great, nice and cool, quiet. This one's a true dual slot card, so you won't have issues with compatibility for the most part in small form factor cases. It is a little bit tall, so that's something to bear in mind, but for the most part, this is going to fit in pretty much any case you're looking at. I bought this Asus one on sale for my wife and her rig. It's been really great as well, but as you can see, it's a 2.5 slot. So we actually had to do a little bit of trimming on her small form factor case in order to get it to fit. You know, bear that in mind when you're buying a video card. Any of the cards we're looking at here, any of these 6600s are going to fit in the cases that we've been looking at, so you really shouldn't have to worry about that. Just buy the one that's the cheapest from a decent company. The ASRock one is great. You also get Dead Island 2 as well as the Callisto project for free, which is really great. Dead Island 2 is not even out yet, so you'll have something to look forward to, as you'll have basically a pre-ordered copy of that. It's an excellent card. It can't really do any ray tracing. If you've ever looked up the videos of people trying to play Portal RTX with it, it is pathetic. It really can't. But in terms of just regular rasterized gaming performance at 1080p, it's just going to do everything you want it to. Now, this is not a novel opinion. What I think where it starts to get a little bit more interesting, by the way, this card's quite a bit more expensive at this point, the 6650 XT, but I've seen a lot of these going on sale for closer to $250, $260. If you see one down at that price range, the $40 premium over the 6600 is absolutely worth it. At $299, it's a little bit more of a toss-up. I think you could kind of go either way. But if you're doing 1440p gaming or you're looking to get a little bit more performance, this card is going to be a really great choice for you as well. Now, when we're looking at the Nvidia options, you know, pretty much we're only going to be looking in the used market because a new RTX 3050, which is going to be the closest price we're going to be seeing to the RX 6600, but a lot lower performance, is really out of the budget that we're looking at here. And if we're looking used on eBay, you can get an RTX 3060 for about $250, but just because someone says it's only been used for gaming and it hasn't been used for Bitcoin mining, that's not something I would take at face value. And obviously, you're bringing in a risk factor with something that's been used. Depending on your skill level, that's a choice you'd have to make. But if you really want an Nvidia card, you're going to be buying used or looking at some of our more creative options we're going to look at in a moment. For the most part, if you're not on an ultra budget, but you want to get good bang for your buck and not break the bank, the RX 6600 is going to be your choice right here for $220. And they have some other ones that are like $230, $240. It's still a great deal. Sometimes they go on sale for even lower than that, but I wouldn't wait on them because they're going to sell out of them. So if you want a great gaming system, the RX 6600 is going to suit you really well. Now, this is where things get different. So there have been some recent videos about how in China they're selling these RX 580 8GB cards new. I don't really know how new they are, maybe mostly new, which is kind of an oxymoronic term. But they've been selling these and people have been having really good luck with them. The YouTuber Tech Yes City did a video and he bought one for $70 thereabouts. And it just performed great. I decided to pick one up myself for my guest rig. I've got a guest computer for when friends come over to play games, and it's been running great. Technically, it's a slightly cut down version of the RX 580. This is the one that I purchased, the Jeshu. I don't know what that is. It's technically the RX 580 2048 SP, which is a kind of a fake way of saying it's closer to an RX 570 than a 580. In reality, the performance of the two is just about in the middle of an RX 580 and RX 570. Doesn't really matter. It's an 8GB card you can get them down to, about $75. This one that I bought's a little bit more expensive now. As you can see, we can get $3 off, so get it closer to $80. It's an incredible deal. They run great. This is going to be targeting more 1080p 60 performance. Some newer games you're going to need to lower settings a little bit, but for the most part, you're going to be gaming without any issues. And at this price of $70 to $80, you get a 2-year warranty, which can't really say what invoking that would be like, considering it came from China, but at least they're claiming that it is. And this is a major company. Milzy is another one. We can look here. Let's see. There's a Milzy card I was looking at. Where is that? Oh, okay, I don't know why I did it. Milzy's a good company. Jashuro's a good company. These are major companies that supply video cards in China. And I can't prove it, but I think they're taking old mining cards and ripping the GPUs off of them, the actual die, and putting all new boards, all new memory modules, and new capacitors, and new coolers and stuff. Is that new? Not really. They say it's new. You can see they get into it here in terms of what 98% new means. In some cases, they might be 100% new. That being said, I think that's actually great because that's keeping those products out of the landfill. And for the most part, the GPU cores don't really go bad. It's everything else. And so if they're replacing everything else, it is really functionally a new card that they're willing to back up with a warranty. For 70 to 80 bucks, it's absolutely a no-brainer. The performance is excellent. Now, you might want to be careful about trying to shave off the last few dollars. I found this one here. I don't know what brand this is. As you can see, it doesn't even have any heat pipes, so they all have these cheapo aluminum, coolers on them, which are a bit worse than what you get from a normal card, but will do the job. This one is so cheap that I don't know if they even have any heat pipes through it, so maybe don't. As I said, there's diminishing returns when you start to really scrape the bottom of the barrel. Comparatively, you've got 10,000 orders here, a lot of reviews. People on YouTube are using these. I've used this card. I can recommend it. It was well packaged, well secured, and I've seen videos about this as well. Now, where things get a little bit different, and I really want to talk about, is something that I saw. So I watched this video from the Toasty Bros. I'm actually just going to go ahead and Google that real quick. Toasty Bros Budget PC. And you will see that they are doing a very similar build to what I'm showing here. They're using the Ryzen 5500. They've got the same motherboard we're looking at. They found some cheap case on Amazon, which is totally fine. Cheap Team Group SSD, some cheap RAM, pretty much everything the same. They've even got the same video card that I was talking about that I actually purchased myself. Now, here's where things start to get a little bit different, and what I wanted to, this is what actually spurred me to make this video, is that an optional card you could get instead would be the RX 5500 XT. Now, this GPU is one generation newer than the RX 580, two technically if you count the 590. Where it really shines is that we're looking at most realistically like a $25 difference with current prices between it and the 580. And this card performs substantially better than a 580 under certain conditions. So it's got the same amount of video memory. It's a little bit newer. If we go ahead and look at some benchmark performance here between the two of them, we can see that someone is comparing a 3050 to a 5500 XT and an RX 580. Now granted, this is the full fat RX 580, not the cut down version we were looking at on AliExpress. So these numbers would actually be a little bit lower than this. What's really interesting here is two things. So not only is there a substantial difference in performance if we're comparing this 57.2 number to this 48.6 number here, that's like almost a 20% difference in performance. What you'll also see is that we have the ability to enable smart access memory. Now, what the long and short of that is it's a motherboard feature that's available on certain AMD boards. And if you're using a newer AMD CPU from the Ryzen 5000 generation, as well as one of these newer RX 5000 series and newer, the RX 500 series being slightly too old. They have some janky drivers you can download online to enable it, but I don't recommend using third-party drivers. What smart access memory it basically means is that the CPU and the GPU can communicate with each other more efficiently, and you can see quite a substantial increase in performance both on the average and the 1% lows by enabling that. That being said, the RX 5500 XT, like its more recent, big brother, the 6500 XT, the newer version, they have a downfall, which is that these cards only use 8 PCI Express lanes, and basically it's because they were adapted from laptop GPUs. The long and short of that means that if you're not using a motherboard that has PCI Express 4.0, you're going to see a significant difference in performance, loss in performance, as opposed to if you were using something like the RX 580. The RX 580 uses PCI Express 3.0, but it has 16 lanes, while the RX 5500 XT 8 gig here has PCI Express 4.0, but only 8 lanes. So you're going to see a significant decrease in performance. I think I might have forgotten to pull up a video to show that. point is, you would not want, you might be thinking, okay, well, generally speaking, when you build a computer, if you are trying to get the most frames per second possible, you skimp on the CPU as much as possible without, going crazy with it, and you get the fastest GPU possible. Okay, so then why don't I just go ahead and pick up the, let's say, Ryzen 5 4500 here, and go for the, where was that? Cheapo motherboard that we were looking at, the 520M. Reason why is that this chipset's not going to have PCI Express 4.0. So you are not going to be able to be utilizing smart access memory, and you're also going to be dealing with the decreased bandwidth, and believe it or not, you may actually get worse performance out of the 5500 XT than the RX 580 in some games. So I only recommend this GPU if you're going for a B550 or X570 motherboard, which you're not going to buy one of those because they're more expensive. So if you bought this, or you bought this, or you bought this, and you've double checked to make sure that the board you're buying has PCI Express 4.0, not only for the M.2, but also for the PCI Express. The vast majority of them do, maybe all of them, but a quick Google search, can answer that for you. If you buy this board or something like it, pairing it with this 5500 XT that we're looking at here for $25 more, maybe only $20 more, maybe only $15 more, depending on which site, which seller you're buying from, it's going to give you just an enormous increase in performance. Can't recommend it highly enough. I think that this is really what's different between my video and all the other videos that I've seen. Because if we look at these differences here, I mean, we can look at a few different games. They're not all going to be the same. As you can see, the difference is less in some games. But in others, and in most games, we're seeing right here a 20% increase in performance. And don't forget that this RX 580 is faster than the one we were looking at from AliExpress. So we're looking at probably a 25% increase in performance for, at most, $25 more. In my opinion, it's a no-brainer. Now, what's interesting is they're also doing this with some Nvidia cards. So if you wanted to go Nvidia for whatever reason, the 1660 Super is not going to quite necessarily be on the same level, but this is actually a really, really good option. And the 1660 Super, as opposed to something like the RX 5500 XT, does not require that you have PCI Express 4.0. It's going to use PCI Express 3.0 so you're not going to see that issue. You could pair this with a cheapo motherboard and get really killer performance. This is a great card. Nvidia has a lot of stuff going for it, and at the right price, I think it's definitely worth it. I think the argument can be made that although the GTX 1660, it's not an RTX card, so you're not going to have that benefit of the ray tracing. But Nvidia still, I think, has a superior feature set to AMD, so this $127 price here is really, really interesting. Now, be careful when buying the Nvidia cards, because I have seen a lot of some of these Nvidia cards on AliExpress here are being sold, and they're actually laptop cards that are being put onto desktop, they're laptop chips being put onto desktop cards, which on the surface shouldn't be a problem, but in reality, they have to give you some weird hokey drivers in order to enable it. I've seen some cards where it works great and there's really no problem. I've seen other cards where that's really not so much the case. This RX 6600M, I've seen a video on this, works great. I've seen some Nvidia cards, not so much, but again, look at that. We've got that same PCI Express 4.0 by 8. So be careful with the cards you're buying. If you don't know very much about PC building, I would recommend just buying one of these ones that videos have already been made about, like 1660 Super, 5500 XT. These cards I think are going to be a lot more compelling. RX 580. These are known, and sometimes you can have weirdness with these Chinese GPUs. So something to bear in mind, but there are some good options for Nvidia users if you're willing to kind of, do some extra research and take a little bit of extra risk in purchasing these cards from China. That being said, I will say I think purchasing one of these from China, even if they're only 98% new, is a lot better than buying a card that's realistically been mined into the ground, which is what you run the risk of buying one of these used cards off of eBay. Finally, once we've put this all together, you're going to need to determine what your minimum power consumption, what your power consumption is going to be. Everything we've looked at is going to be able to be serviced by pretty much any power supply if it's quality. There are power supply calculators online. You can go and punch in all your parts, and they'll give you a rough idea of what you need to purchase in terms of a power supply. Wattage, for the most part, is usually not the problem, and 80 plus efficiency rating is usually not the problem either. There is a great list, if you just Google search PSU tier list. There's this extremely, this is like weaponized autism. Someone has taken all of these different power supplies and rated them in terms of their quality, so you can know which ones to avoid, because on the surface, if you're just going through PC Part Picker here, you might think that this Thermaltake Smart and this Cooler Master Master Watt might be comparable, but you'd be wrong, because they fall in very different points in terms of their actual build quality, and this can sometimes be as different as, I know that the BM2 is a good power supply, but the regular one is not so good. So use this tier list. It'll allow you to look for deals. I selected this Cooler Master Master Watt 550. It's a great semi-modular power supply, nice and cheap. You can unplug some of the cables that you're not using, which is nice, and pretty much all the ones you're going to use are going to stay plugged in, so it's not a fully modular power supply, but this is a good option. If you were going to build a small form factor build and you wanted to wait and get an ITX system, I've purchased this Lee & 750 SFX power supply recently. If you have questions about this, you can ask me, but if you're building in a case that's basically, if you're building an ITX system in a small form factor case, a lot of them don't allow ATX power supplies, so you'll need to get an SFX form factor, which is a bit smaller. This Lee & one I purchased, I got it on sale. I think it's terrific. I like it because the cables are not solid ribbons. They're like each individual braided, so they're kind of easier to route so that you're not accidentally blocking the airflow in a small case. This Silverstone one I bought as well, really great for another system. This is an SFX-L, so you'll have to make sure that your case can fit something like this, but it might be a little bit quieter because it uses a bigger fan. Silverstone's an excellent company. There's some other ones that you can get. I can't really speak to the quality of them, but you can reference that tier list to get more information. As you can see, we have some more options here. I think this is the cheapest one you can get at this point, the 650 from Silverstone. We'll just bear in mind, this may not apply to most people, but I'm really into small form factor building, and I purchased one of these Silverstone brackets to adapt to fit a Silverstone case I have, and it wouldn't fit my power supply. It was like 1 millimeter too big, and I had to cut off this little lip. So bear in mind, if you have problems with that, I've seen some of these ones that don't have the lip here on Amazon. They also are not vented, unfortunately. This is probably not going to apply to you. If you have questions about small form factor building, if you want to build a super tiny computer that's easy to bring around, you can maybe message me, or maybe I'll do another video on it in the future. Just wanted to let you know so you don't deal with the same issue I had. Finally, at that point, we're going to have a good idea of what we're putting together. I think that this system that I've put together here, the 5600G, the B550M, and maybe throwing on the RX 5500 XT, or possibly that same RX 580 we were looking at, is a really great setup. You can make some slight changes depending on what you're looking for. If this was confusing to you, you can just go and watch one of those other videos that are a little bit less in-depth that just say buy this. If I were to make the same recommendation and you wanted to get the best frames for your dollar, I'd buy the 5600G, the Gigabyte B550M DS3HAC. I'd buy memory that's basically like this, or if you don't care about getting the cheapest price possible, you can just buy this Silicon Power. This Team Group SSD is totally serviceable. I would go ahead and take the risk that I think is relatively small. I've had nothing but good experience with this brand. Go ahead and purchase this RX 5500 XT and drop that in your system. Make sure you enable Smart Access Memory when you get it built. There's a short YouTube tutorial you can follow to be able to do that in case it's not enabled by default. I'd buy this Thermaltake Versa H18 Micro ATX Mini Tower case. I loved building in it. I thought it was super easy. It's super simple. It's got 3 USB ports on the front, 2 of which are 3.0. Everything's thumb screws, and it's nice and light. If you don't want the side panel, you can get the one that doesn't have it. That's the one I built in. That's really up to you. And to me, this Cooler Master Master Watt 550 watt 80 plus bronze certified semi-modular power supply for $50 looks pretty dang good. If you want to save even more money and you are somebody who has maybe a little bit of a lower time preference, you're willing to wait, go ahead and go over to r/build-a-PC sales. And there are awesome sales on components being posted here every single day. Not only that, but you can get a lot of really great information from other people on Reddit. I can't believe I'm saying that, but you can get good information from other users on Reddit by going into the comments, and people will be talking about it. This is also great if you're new to PC building and you don't know all the ins and outs and of all these different parts, and you're putting together a build based on my recommendations. Even if you're not going to be looking for a sale, chances are that part has gone on sale at some point. And if you go up in here into the Reddit search bar, you can go ahead and search what your part is. And you can look at old comment threads of people talking about that part, their experience with it, problems that you might not find just by looking at like Newegg or Amazon reviews. This is actually a really great resource, not only for finding cheap deals, but also for purchasing, like getting information on what you're purchasing, even if it's not on sale. Great example. I think I refreshed this. This was $99 yesterday. You wanted a cheap, high refresh rate monitor, 165 hertz. It's VA, so it's not going to be the best quality, but it'll probably be better than what you've used because most people don't know. You can find great deals on stuff. This is a good monitor, and if you wanted more information on a cheap monitor deal, just go here and click the monitor flare, and you will see all the ones that have been posted, and they will be talking about it in the comments, letting you know why it's crappy or not. As you can see, if only it was a fully glossed screen. It's absolutely the wrong opinion. I don't know why you would want that, but that's not the point. If that's you, that's fine. You're going to need Windows. I recommend cdkeyoffer.com. There might be another site that's better. I just use this one because a YouTuber that I like recommended this, and I have a little discount code. If you type in the words broken silicon, which, I don't get any money for that. They do. They get a little kickback. It takes Windows down to like something like, I don't know, $15. They already have a discount code here. CKMC takes it down to like $17, which is almost as low as using that code. There might be better key sites. Feel free to shop around if you find one cheaper. Get a copy of Windows 10 or Windows 11 if you really hate yourself. But that's it. That's really all there is to building an epic computer. If you build this computer, you're going to be purchasing something that is probably the best price to performance you could possibly get. You could later drop a 4090 into it if you upgraded the power supply and upgrade the CPU, and you could still be using the same case and the same RAM and same everything, and which is, that might be kind of insane to do, but you'd probably have 90% of the performance of a system that costs 3 times as much. And so I think this is a really great recommendation. If you have questions, please feel free to ask me. I know this video was long, and if you're new to computer building, you're probably confused. But there are all sorts of people that are willing to help you. Even if I wasn't able to help you in the comments, if I was busy or something and you wanted to buy something that day. Just like I mentioned, there is r/build-a-PC sales. There's also r/build-a-PC, where you can go and take all the recommendations I made from this and go ahead and ask Reddit to give you a hand with optimizing it in case you had any questions. But if you follow the instructions I gave you, you're going to build a really awesome computer. As you can see here, we're looking at only $386.27. If we account for tax and we add on that RX 5500 XT we were looking at, you're looking at probably less than or just about $500 for an incredible system. If you wanted to spend a little bit more, you could drop in, you could go for the 5600. You could go ahead and drop in that, where'd it go? This guy. You're going to get even better performance. Really, it just depends on how much money you've got. You could save even more. If we went through here and we swapped this out for the 4500, boom, we just saved, $30. Then we go ahead and drop this down to a cheaper motherboard. We just saved another $30. And we go through and buy one of those RX 580s. We just saved maybe another $25. And now we've just taken it down to be like a $400 computer. And so, you can basically add $100 plus or minus $100 depending on how you want to configure this, maybe $150 if you want to spend a bit more. Then you're going to have a great computer. It's going to cost you somewhere between $400 and $600, and you'll be able to play pretty much every game and not really have any problems and have room to upgrade in the future. And I'd call that a win. So if you have questions, put them in the comments below. Go ask Reddit. Go ask somebody that you know who, you'd be surprised who in your friend group might have had experience building a computer. But if you've got some real basic information here, building a computer is real easy. There's excellent guides on it on YouTube from a variety of different YouTubers that I highly recommend. But other than that, I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas. I'm going to be hopefully streaming a little bit here and there. I'm married now. I've got a full-time job and a side hustle and a small business that I'm doing. And I got a lot going on. So I can't commit to that happening frequently. But I just finally got my own gaming computer put together, as I hadn't had one for years. And I've been enjoying gaming for the first time in a while. And so, yeah. Hope this was helpful for all of you. I know this is a little bit strange for this channel, but other than that, wish you guys Merry Christmas.